Making sure we're good here. Alright. Hello everyone, and welcome to the Weekly WoW News, the show where I go back and recap news from the past week. I don't do a comprehensive review of every single thing that has come out. I just pick the things that I think are interesting and have something to say about. As always, I'm going to answer any questions that show up in the chat at the end of the stream, so stay tuned until then. Whatever you ask, I will get around to answering it. Alright, so let's kick things off. As usual, I'm going to start with the kind of more boring stuff and work my way into the more interesting things. So first off, Darkmoon Faire is back up this week. So this is a great way to get some bonus experience to level your alts with. So I strongly encourage that you do that. There's also all kinds of cool unlockables that you can get as well. So there's that. In our last weekly news episode, we talked a little bit about a theory about how Island Expedition rewards might work, and we've got some follow-up to that. This is still theory, not confirmed by Blizzard, but many players are experiencing this theory working in action as they're playing the game. So this is just telling us that in addition to the things we thought about before, where there was a correspondence between the enemies you were fighting and the rewards you could possibly get, it now seems like there is an island creature theme. So the 3 islands every week will also come with a creature theme shown on the expedition map. This may influence the rewards as well as the invasion event that occurs during some of the island expeditions. So the kind of summary of what this really means is that in order to maximize your chances of getting rewards for island expeditions, you actually don't want to complete them as fast as possible. You want to try to kill as many different creature types associated with these rewards and complete as many of these invasion events as possible before you actually win. Now, you do want to win the island expedition so that you can get the rewards, but instead of hitting every single, azerite mine or treasure chest that you can, you may want to try to just keep ahead of the NPCs by going around and killing as many things as possible. Once again, this is theory, but like I said, many players have been experiencing this actually taking place when they're doing island expeditions, so it's worth testing out and trying it out, especially if you have a 3-man group that you can try it out with some dedicated actual people who are going to follow the concept here and help you find out if you can get more rewards this way. Next up, Mythic plus Dungeons are going to award more loot above plus 10 levels, and we're also getting a new keystone. So Blizzard made it so deleting your key no longer makes you lose your keystone for the entire week, but instantly makes it so that you get a new keystone at the end of your Mythic Plus or Mythic Zero dungeon. So this is a way that you can re-roll your keystones to get a better dungeon. So you could delete your key and now just go run a Mythic Zero dungeon to get a new key instead of having your key for the week just totally gone. In addition to that, it says each keystone level above plus 10 will add an additive plus 40% chance for an additional piece of loot to drop. At Keystone 13, you'll get an additional guaranteed piece with a 20% chance of another item, and at Keystone 15, you'll get 2 additional pieces. So this will stack up the higher you get, the more chances you get at additional gear, and at some point, those percentages will stack into a guaranteed additional piece of gear. So, pretty interesting stuff there if you are into the Mythic Plus dungeons. Alright, let's talk a little bit about the PTR, some of the stuff that's been going on here. As always, I'm not going to spoil anything, any broadcast text or story stuff as much as possible. I mainly just want to focus on big new features that are coming or new models and spell effects, that kind of stuff. So the first thing is raid testing has started for Siege of Zuldazar, which means that we're well into this PTR and we're probably looking at a launch for this particular patch 8.1, maybe in January-ish or so, possibly December. I'm sure they're going to let us know what the release date is at BlizzCon, but it does look like, based on the pacing of the patch, it's going to be coming, I guess, sooner rather than later. I don't know. If you've been frustrated with Battle for Azeroth so far, I don't think sooner is a possibility. It's just later and later and later. But, yeah. The raid testing has started for Siege of Zuldazar on the PTR. as of October the 8th. Next, coming in patch 8.1, we're going to be able to do the LFR Queue for Legion raid content. So this is something that we currently can't do. In the past, when a new expansion has come out, we've been able to queue up for the looking for raid version of old raids. You may ask, well, why do you want to do that? The reason is there's a different color tint in LFR for the different armor sets, so you may like that particular color tint more than you do the one for heroic or mythic or whatever. So this gives you the ability to go back and farm that content. So that's going to be coming in 8.1, and we've got more stuff coming in 8.1. We've got multi-thread optimization. So all this means is they are optimizing some of WoW's features in order to make them run better on modern PCs. This means if you have a newer PC, you should be able to get more Warcraft out of it than you can now because of these optimizations. Next up, we got a couple more Paladin animations. We saw a few of them on the last news stream. This time we have Flash of Light, so this is a healing spell for Paladins. And now, it's an actual beam of light that gets cast on your target. So that's an interesting effect. I don't know if I like it. It kind of looks like someone's shining a really powerful flashlight onto you. I don't know. It's okay. It's definitely going to be more noticeable, you know, who you're casting this on when you're actually in a dungeon, though, so that's great. And I said it on the last video, I can't have a newscast without this freaking picture coming up. Oh well. And then we also got a new animation for Beacon of Light. This is coming as well. So this puts a nice kind of like light aura around the target, which lets you know that that target is being healed in addition to whoever you're actually targeting. So pretty cool stuff. Next up we have some icons for the Koltiran and Zandalari racials in the 8.1 PTR. I don't know if you consider these spoilers, but if you do, you can look away. We've got the names and the icons. So the Koltiran racials are Brush It Off, Child of the Sea, Haymaker, Jack of All Trades, and Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. Now, I'm not sure what most of these are going to do, but Brush It Off sounds like maybe it's going to break a CC effect on you. Child of the Sea, probably going to be like swim speed or extended underwater breathing. Haymaker sounds like possibly a short stun or something of that nature. Jack of All Trades, it kind of looks like, based on the picture, that maybe they're going to get like a overall bonus to the different professions, you know, maybe like a +5 to everything or something like that. That might be a little bit overpowered, I don't know, but that's kind of what that makes me think of. And Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner, I am not really sure what that would be. And then for Zandalari, we've got Embrace of the Loa, and there are different ones for all the different Loas that we encounter while we're leveling as the Horde, and then there's also Ward of the Loa, and these are themed around different elemental effects. Now, I'm not sure if the Zandalari are going to have all of these, or if they pick one, or they can, you know, switch them as they go on. It seems a little weird if they just have, like, the two racials here. But if it's like a mix and match thing, or if they do get all of them, that would be very interesting. I will say that I like the icons here. I like the style of them. They look a little more cartoony, I guess, than typical WoW icons like these here. These just kind of look dark and boring. I do like, I especially like these four at the end here. So, yeah, who knows? We'll see what they are. You've got my predictions for what they probably are. Embrace of the Loa, I think these are going to be maybe like smaller versions of the Loa buffs that you can get when you are questing on the Horde side. And Ward of the Loa, this sounds like it's going to be some sort of elemental resistance to whatever effect is going to be applied, like Shadow or Nature or Holy. And then finally, in patch 8.1 on the PTR, Incursions are now available for testing. This is probably the most exciting thing to me because I level a lot of alts, and we're seeing faction incursions and how they work. They work similarly to Legion invasions, except there's a little twist on them. Instead of just one zone getting taken over and everybody, regardless of faction, is doing the same world quest, now one faction invades the zone of another faction, and the invading faction has world quests that have them doing things to try to capture points and that kind of stuff, whereas the faction that's being invaded is trying to fight off the invaders and ultimately destroy their giant airship. So this looks to be a little bit more interesting than Legion invasions. My big thing here is I know that they know that we use these incursions and invasions to level our alts, so I'm interested to see if they actually keep them as viable for alt leveling as they were in Legion, or if now with that knowledge they decide to tone them down a lot so that they're not actually a great way to level up alts. That's kind of my worry, is that they're going to do something like that. I feel like a lot of the changes they made in Battle for Azeroth have been pushing you to grind more. So that's an honest concern for me. So we'll see what happens. I think I'm going to get onto the PCR and maybe kind of test these out a little bit. But I'm definitely excited for these to come, even if they don't give the absolute best XP, because it's just a different way to level your alts, and I'll take about whatever I can get to change up the flow from character to character. Okay, now we got some Blizz news. Just general Blizzard news here. We got some sneak peeks at the BlizzCon Blizzard store gear. We got a Diablo backpack, some different jackets and things here. All in all, there's nothing here that I'm like really freaking out about, like super excited. I think the style on this Greymane statue and the Sourfang statue is pretty interesting. Apparently WoW Legends, I believe, is like a manga or something that they've done before, or a comic. So these are highly stylized compared to their in-game figures. That's pretty interesting. I do notice, Diablo got a couple of extra items here. I mean, World of Warcraft is always going to get several items because, I mean, it's by far their biggest game. But if you notice, we've got a Hearthstone, we've got 2 Overwatch, which makes sense because Overwatch has been a big deal. But we've also got 2 Diablo this year. Whereas last year, I'm not saying as far as the stuff that they sold, but just last year, Diablo kind of got passed over. And that leads us into the next little news topic here, which is we've got the BlizzCon 2018 schedule. In the big highlights here, Diablo has 2 panels. What's next immediately following the opening ceremony, and a general Q&A. So generally at BlizzCon, what happens is you get the big opening ceremony, everybody comes out and they're like, we got this for this game and that for that game, and yeah, and then whatever the big, huge thing was is the thing that gets that panel following the opening ceremony. So last year, that panel went to World of Warcraft and they talked about Battle for Azeroth. So Diablo getting a what's next panel like that right after the opening ceremony is a pretty strong indicator that we're probably going to get some kind of new Diablo game. Now, I imagine if they were going to do the announcements that we've, heard rumored so far about like the Netflix series or the Wii version of Diablo or even a Diablo 2 remaster, I don't know that those would really warrant having a what's next panel, unless the other games that were at BlizzCon just didn't have anything that exciting either. So I'm really hoping this means that we're getting like a Diablo 4 or something of that magnitude this year. So we'll see. Blizzard's Gear Shop gets its own panel previewing 2019 merchandise. What? Why? You're already trying to sell me shit that isn't going to be out for another year? Or crap, sorry. But yeah, that's the big things for me. Diablo's got a big panel, and why are you showing me gear merchandise from BlizzCon next year, this year? That doesn't make sense to me. But the big piece of Blizzard news from the past week has been that the president of Blizzard, Mike Morhaime, has stepped down from his position, and he is now being replaced by J. Allen Brack. Many streamers out there have very strong opinions about this, and I will say this much. I'm not going to pretend to be caught up in the drama or have a very strong opinion about this. I don't. I don't really care about, like, I feel like watching Mike Morhaime at BlizzCon was a lot of fun. I feel like J. Allen Brack has a lot more issues with being out there in front of people and giving a, like, interesting and exciting presentation. So maybe BlizzCon's going to suffer because of that. But ultimately, I think that presidential position at BlizzCon, is not as involved with the direction of the games on a small scale as we might think. I feel like that president position is probably something that, they're dealing with the Activision side of the company and the Blizzard side of the company and trying to make sure that, their overall teams are on task. I mean, we're talking about the president of Blizzard Entertainment, so obviously they have some say over what's happening with the games, but they have to pay attention to all the games. So I don't think this is necessarily going to spell like a really horrible downturn for World of Warcraft. I don't know. I can't really say. I don't have a super strong feeling about it, and honestly, I feel like once you get up to president level and higher, you're really just dealing with like Activision style politics, like how do we get sub numbers up? How do we meet these, monetary quotas, and how do we make sure that our profits are up and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know. I don't know if it's going to have a drastic effect on the direction that the game's headed or not. So we'll see. We'll just have to see. I think BlizzCon might give us a good idea if J. Allen Brack does do the opening ceremony like Mike Morhaime usually did, and maybe we can get a feel for, how he's going to fit in the position and what his sort of perspective is on all the Blizzard games and not just World of Warcraft. So we'll see. Okay, so that's all the easy stuff out of the way. Now we're getting into the meat and potatoes because we have got more information on the Azerite Armor system. So we've got, last week we had some posts where users were putting up these posts about Azerite Armor saying issue number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. These are the issues that the community is complaining about. Then we had some responses from community manager Lore to those issues where a lot of them did not sound great. They sounded kind of negative and kind of deal with it. And there's some drama that happened after that. I'm not going to get into that. I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about what's actually going on in the game. So Blizzard has come out and they have acknowledged that there are some big issues with Azerite Armor, and they've talked about some of the things that they want to fix. Chances are, if you've watched other WoW streamers, they've already covered this, but I'm going to give you my take on it anyway. So the big issues that they pinpointed were overall availability, lack of agency, and trait depth. So, while there's plenty of Azerite armor in the 295 to 340 item level range, further sources are heavily limited and susceptible to bad luck. Even players who are doing a wide range of high-end content are still wearing at least one item level 340 piece, despite having replaced all their other gear several times over. Everything else about the system is basically irrelevant if you can't get your hands on the gear in the first place. So here's what they're doing for that. They are going to utilize Emissary rewards. The plan is to make Azerite Armor rewards from Emissary quests scale all the way up to 370 based on your item level, which gives everyone a new reliable source for appropriate gear. Further on, we're looking at making some improvements to the ways Emissary reward gear, but getting more Azerite Armor in your hands is the higher priority for the immediate future. Now, this is something that is patched in, I believe, and I think we're going to take a look at some of the things they're doing with it in a couple of posts ahead of this one. But basically what they're saying is we want to give you a reliable way to get your hands on some Azerite gear, so they're tying it into the Emissary system. Now here's the thing, you could already get some of these through Emissary, and now what they're saying is we're going to let those scale up to 370. Well, in the past, in Legion, every time a new big patch came out, the World Quest would increase their scaling to match where they would be in terms of that patch so that they didn't become totally irrelevant, which means at some point these azerite armor pieces would have scaled up to 370 anyway, and they probably will end up scaling beyond that. What they did is they just went ahead and did that now for the azerite armor. So your rings and your trinkets and that kind of stuff that you could get from World Quest or emissaries are not going to scale up any further than 340, but now your azerite pieces that you may get could scale up to 370. They do say some things in here about trying to make further improvements to the ways Emissary reward gear. Most people are thinking that maybe they're going to implement some form of smart loot where it'll take a look at what your low piece of azerite armor is and maybe have a higher chance to offer that as a reward for the Emissary system. But we don't actually know because Blizzard hasn't specifically said what they're doing just yet. The next problem that they pointed out was lack of agency. When items do drop, it can feel like you're not really given much in the way of options. You could choose whether you want this to be a fire or frost piece or a versatile one with a generic trait. But that isn't necessarily an interesting choice. No, it isn't. And when you look at the complete package, those choices don't feel like they're having a meaningful impact on how you play your character. I agree with this 100%. If you've watched any of my streams, you probably have seen me literally get a piece of azerite gear, ignore the fact that I can pick a trait on it for like an hour, finally go back to it and just go, yeah, that one's good enough, I don't care. And then just pick one and close it out because it doesn't affect my gameplay at all, you know. I've harped on this before about how getting a random effect that doesn't cause me to think about the way I'm playing the game or change up my abilities in any manner is just totally and completely boring. So they said when we add new azerite armor in what we're calling BFA Season 2, starting with Siege of Zuldazar and its corresponding Mythic Plus and PvP seasons, we're going to add another outer ring to those pieces of gear that has two spec-specific trait options for each spec. This effectively means that your favorite traits will be available on a lot more items, while also opening up a lot more options across the scope of all your azerite pieces. Okay, so first of all, what does this mean? It means that... What does this mean? What does this mean? It means that you're going to have your core ring that's going to increase your item level. Then you're going to have that next ring that gives you one of those like sort of generic, non-class specific options for your azerite traits. Then you're going to have the next ring, which is the one we currently have on the outer ring right now, that is most likely going to give you a generic trait and then one for each spec. Then you're going to have a fourth ring where you're going to have two spec-specific traits for every spec that your class can have. So if you're playing on a warrior, there's going to be 2 fury, 2 arms, 2 protection. So this means that you get a choice on that outer ring that's spec specific, and you always have a choice between 2 traits for that spec. Then you go in and you can pick your next class specific trait, then you can pick your generic one, then you can pick your item level. Now I see a couple issues with this. Adding another ring probably means that there's more azerite power that you have to put into your Heart of Azeroth to unlock those rings further down. If they set it up so that that's how it works, is that this fourth ring isn't a bonus, but it's something you still have to earn and really work towards, then it could take even longer to get your piece all the way in, get all your traits, and get your final item level upgrade. We'll have to see what they do with that and where they set the bar as far as what it takes to start unlocking those things. I do like that the outer ring is the one that has the most choice for the spec that you're playing, though. That's nice, so that the first thing you get is that choice, and then you can hone in from there on the other choices that you want. I don't know that adding a fourth ring is necessarily what I would do. It all depends on the traits that they're going to put into those rings. So we'll take a look at some of the traits that are on the 8.1 PTR here in just a minute. Okay, finally, trait depth. Several of the traits that are considered the best mathematically turn out to be some of the simplest mechanically, which reinforces the sense that the system isn't really affecting gameplay. Yes, I agree. We're also going to continue to work on the individual traits themselves. We've done some basic tuning so far, but we're taking the lessons we've learned from these first iterations forward, and Tides of Vengeance will bring new traits into the pool that reflect that. Our goal is to make the more generic traits be decent middle-of-the-road options for when you want to use a single piece for multiple situations or specs, but make sure the spec-specific options, which are generally the more interesting traits, win out in their respective environments. Now, I don't necessarily know what they really mean by win out in their respective environments. I don't know if they're saying like, hey, there's going to be PvP traits and there's going to be Mythic Plus themed traits and raid themed traits, or they're just kind of covering their bases and saying their respective environments, whatever we choose to make them. But I do like this because if they're giving us more choice between spec-specific traits, and the spec-specific traits are going to be better than the generic ones, and they're trying to make them more interesting as far as mechanically more interesting, then I think this is all going to lead to a much better system that will help you to customize your character and maybe kind of give yourself a unique build or a unique style of play that currently it feels like in Battle for Azeroth is just not there. Okay, next up, Azerite Armor from Emissaries now scales up to 370 item level, so that was patched in. And then they made a couple of tweaks. They've changed the requirements for eye level 370 Emissary caches. So they said, based on reports, we were able to find a strange behavior where a player's loot history could be inaccurate depending on the loot spec they had selected. So essentially what they're saying is that they have now lowered the threshold for when the Azerite armor from the Emissary caches will scale up to 370. So it was a little bit higher before, now it's a little bit lower. That's basically all that's coming down to. Now we get into the good stuff. This is 8.1 PTR Azerite traits. These are some of the things we have available. These are not confirmed, not official. They're in the game, they're in the PTR, but that definitely means that they could change at any time. But we've got some examples here. So Death Knight got Hell Chains. Dark Transformations, which is that's what you use to transform your minion into a more powerful minion, links you and your pet with chains that deal 467 fire damage every second to enemies between you for 5 seconds. So this is an ability that's based on an ability in Diablo where you basically have this sword that could spawn a demon and it would chain to you. So wherever the demon was attacking stuff, there would be a chain that went from the demon to you and it was on fire, and anything that got hit by that chain would start taking damage over time, fire damage. So they're essentially bringing that in. This is really interesting because it makes you think about, when do I hit Dark Transformation? I've got to pay attention to the positioning of my pet. Do I want to move around in like a circle and constantly put this dot on everybody? Or, what do I want to do with this? That's interesting. It changes up your gameplay. It makes you think about what you're actually doing in the game. Hunters get Dire Consequences. Kill command deals 525 damage and has a chance to summon a dire beast. I'm going to be honest with you, I haven't played Hunter this expansion. I don't know how good that is. Monk, Dance of Chi-Ji. Spinning Chi has a chance to make your next spinning crane kick free and deal additional damage. That's pretty cool. So this means that you're watching out for this proc, and when it happens, you actually have to hit a button. It's not just a proc that happens and you're like, oh, okay, I guess I got like 10 extra agility now. Alright, I'll just keep doing what I was going to do anyway. No, this is your spinning chi, you get this Dance of Chi-Ji proc and you're like, oh snap, I need to spinning crane kick for free and deal that additional damage. And that's a nice chunk of additional damage too. Effectively, to me, this kind of looks like you can weave in spinning crane kick and still do a good amount of damage, even if you haven't gotten it all the way up to 5 stacks. So that's pretty cool. Fury of Zuen. Your combo strikes grant you the Fury of Zuen, giving your next Fist of Fury a 3% chance to grant 130 haste, which is boring, but haste is a pretty good stat. And invoke Zuen the White Tiger for 8 seconds. That's cool. Now this part stacks up to 33 times. That's crazy. That is crazy. That is a lot of haste, and that's a lot of white tigers, or one white tiger that's out for a really long time. That's cool. I just did Monk yesterday as my tea time stream, and if I had this, I would be thrilled to be out. I'd be like, yep, let's get those combo strikes going faster, 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 faster. The awesome thing about haste is it reduces your global cooldown too, so you can hit those buttons more and more often. That's cool. I'm really excited about that trait. Rogues I haven't played yet this expansion, and Warlocks I haven't played, so I'm going to skip those. I'll talk about Shaman. Earthquake deals 596 physical damage instantly, which is cool, and has a 25% chance to make your next Chain Lightning be instant cast. Okay, that's cool. That's a proc that makes you want to hit a button. That's a step in the right direction. It's not drastically changing everything about your abilities, but it is a good move forward. These are way better than the crap we currently have. Way better. And what you got to keep in mind, and many people have already talked about this, is that the azerite system is supposed to be a progression from beginning of expansion to the end. If you look at what we were doing at the beginning of Legion and what we were doing at the end, there were so many layers, so many things added on that, you know, your characters played totally differently. And if they were going to introduce azerite traits that were super insanely awesome, they would probably want to do it at the end of the expansion. And many people have talked about how, you know, they've gone with this idea of, well, it's gonna be kind of bad for a while, and then at the end we're gonna build up to some really awesome traits. I think Preach has talked about this. I think maybe Bellular mentioned it, but I totally agree with that. You know, that I think that is what they're going for, and I also agree with the sentiment that it's really crappy to do that, because it means that the beginning of the expansion, when you want to get people hooked, when you have new players coming back to try out the game, is like the most boring, uninteresting time for one of your main key systems in the game. But I will say this, I'm really excited. If the rest of the traits that we get for the specializations and the classes look even remotely similar to this, 8.1 is going to be a hell of a lot more fun than 8.0. So I'm really stoked about that. Alright, the final piece of news, nothing to do with World of Warcraft. Well, okay, that's a lie. Heroes of the Storm has revealed who their next hero is going to be in the game, and it's Mal'Ganis, the horrible, horrible Nathrazim Lord who was responsible for the helping corrupt Arthas and turn him into the Lich King, is going to be playable on Heroes of the Storm. So that's pretty cool. Check that out if that's something you're interested in. Alright, so that is the news. That's the recap. I'm going to check chat. Nothing over there. So thanks for tuning into the news, and I will see you on the next video.